So, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Welcome to the show where the bears boldly go, where we're carrying on our look at Star Trek Lower Decks with episodes 3 and 4 this week. Episode 3 is called Temporal Edict, and episode 4 is called Moist Vessel. Good episodes this week.
Very good. I did wonder where they were going with Moist Vessel when I saw the title of it. I thought initially it was probably referring to the ship that they were dragging, but obviously it became apparent that it was their own.
Yes.
With how aggressively wet it gets later in the episode.
So let's talk about
episode 3
Edict
first. Yeah, of course.
first.
Yeah.
In this one, we discover that it is normal for Lower Decks crew to build buffer time into their tasks.
Yep. Which
So
is
they always overestimate how long something will take.
Something that was probably originally a Scotty thing that we became aware of putting a bit of extra time in, which I mean, obviously, it sounds like you're slacking off, and in the beginning of this episode, it makes it look like they have a bit of slack off time. But at the same time, it's Star Trek. Anything can go wrong. So, like, even if it is a routine thing, something could go very, very wrong. And if you triple the time that you estimate that it might take, then maybe you might actually get it done on time.
So, unfortunately, Boimler accidentally lets this on to the captain, who has decided that after being shortchanged of a nice ambassadorial mission, wants people to stop taking the mick of the ship, wants people to take the ship more seriously.
Indeed, yes.
So she dictates that no more buffer time, and she puts everyone on a 60-second window for tasks.
Yes, or a 60-minute or whatever it is.
It's a countdown.
It's some sort of countdown. It's quite similar to the opening of B99 season 4. Is it?
Yeah.
With the captain that they kill in that season because he has a heart defect. So it's very much a it's this episode actually that in a way has proven already that this is legitimately Star Trek. That it isn't just a slightly fun kind of fanboyish look through the lens with oh god, what's her name? The main female character.
Mariner.
I'm so bad with names. It's with her as the avatar for us nerdy fans. Like this is legitimate Star Trek because this is really a workers' rights episode. Like this is talking about the need for like the correct amount of time that it takes. They need some downtime. They need a break. They need rest time
because they get the job done.
Yeah, because they get the job done.
What matters?
Indeed. And I mean, I've worked in companies that have a slightly more liberal attitude to the amount of hours, like the store's budget as far as hours goes. If you can justify it, if you need the extra time, by all means do it. But then I've also worked for companies where like literally 20 seconds over the period, and that's a disciplinary, and surprise, the one that will give you the disciplinary for 20 seconds extra is the one that you get the least satisfying results out of. So yeah, again, this was
as we saw in this episode, right? It tires everyone.
It tires everyone
because to the point where they make the joke that a bunch of people with spears can take over the entire ship.
Exactly.
Like it's evident in when, obviously, it doesn't affect Boimler in the same way. He's fine with it
because he craves that structure.
Yeah.
Because he's someone, like, obviously in the previous episodes, in the first 2 episodes, where it shows that he needs more than his book learning and more than his rule. Like, to be a great Starfleet officer, he needs to expand. This one also shows that, like, he has great strengths that others don't. So it's a nice, well written episode, I thought.
It's when he comes across the invading force.
Yeah.
And he's like, hold on, I've got a phaser.
Yeah.
And it just highlights how ludicrous it is that these people have managed to take over.
That, like, him, who is not a combat ready officer in the slightest, is actually taking the ship back almost single handedly. It's like,
and then our B story has Mariner and Shitty Riker.
Yes.
On the
on the crystal obsessed alien planet.
Yes, Commander Jack Ransom. Again, there's a mistake made because of the lack of rest people are getting, and they get captured.
Yep.
And we have to have a fight to the death.
Yes.
To win, and Mariner insists it should be her because she's good at this.
And then shows off all her scars, and then Ransom gives her another.
Yeah, stabs her in the foot.
Yeah. So he shows why he is a ranking officer, because he is willing to hurt his underlings to make sure that they don't get killed.
And he kirks up.
He does. He properly kirks up.
The old
the entire fight is the double fist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love how it's this big imposing alien he's fighting, but the alien's not a good fighter.
He isn't a good fighter, but he still should be big and strong enough that, like, I love the joke of the double fist, like, shouldn't, like, because it almost turns to that point where, like, this has become an actual martial art, that, like, this is the human form of martial arts now.
But I also love the joke that he just wants to read books, not fight to the death in a gladiator pit.
Yeah. I mean, I love that.
And you have this wonderful bit at the end where the king of a planet,
the leader of some sort,
is frustrated that they've never had a proper fight to the death.
Yeah.
And for Gladiator is like, have you considered, like, a legal system with a jury and a judge?
No,
it's a good episode, and
it was great.
Gets a new Starfleet rule named after him.
Yes, a new protocol.
Yes, the most un-Boimler thing possible. It's about shirking rules and cutting corners.
You must bend, if not slightly break the rules, to get things done. Which I think is, I mean, obviously we like going back to the workers' rights issues. Like, this is set most certainly in a period in Starfleet where there's no money, at least within the Federation. So therefore, no, I mean, as in within the Federation, there's no, they don't get paid. They obviously get some.
They haven't done since Kirk's era.
I mean, one assumes they get a pocket money so that when they are on an alien planet, that they can have that still does have a.
I assume they replicate it.
Yeah, it's all just like forgery.
They print money.
Yeah. Or, like, something along those lines. But they have in theory, there's no need for such regimental schedules, because in theory, all of these people actually want to be in Starfleet. Like, in the same way that, like, if they wanted to be an artist, there's no financial reason not to be an artist in that time period. Like, especially for humans. Like what was it in which series was it that recently described Earth as a paradise? I was watching DS9. Yeah, and it's with the Marquis storyline early on in DS9 at the end of TNG. Cisco describes Earth as a paradise, but obviously the outlying systems of the Federation not so much. That if you are from Earth, you literally have no want.
Yeah.
Like, so, if you want to be an artist, be an artist. If you want to be a farmer, be a farmer. If you want to play golf as a living, play golf as a living. Or in the case of Dr. Bashir, play tennis. So like, this is a great story within that Star Trek framework of workers' rights, even in this far off, distant utopian society. So I thoroughly loved it.
We had a cameo at the very end
from
the most important member of Starfleet ever.
Yes, from Chief Miles O'Brien, which actually made me and the wife, because we watched so much Star Trek recently, like heavily Miles O'Brien based Star Trek. It made me and the wife actually have a little tear in our eyes.
I love O'Brien. Have you ever seen the Miles O'Brien comics, like this web comic that a Star Trek fan has just done about the life of Miles O'Brien?
I haven't, but I've heard about it. Yeah,
I'll have to find the link and send it to you. It's brilliant.
I imagine that was probably one of the reasons that they chose Miles O'Brien to be at the end of this episode. Of course, spoilers. They reveal that not only does the Boimler protocol become the most important protocol in the history of Starfleet, but he's the second most important person behind Miles O'Brien in the history of Starfleet. So nice little ending. And
I think it also shows off that our frame onto Star Trek is of the Renegades, right? It's
but then
I mean, even as stuffy as Picard potentially is, he's still the exception, not the rule as such.
But then he also, I mean, going back to Miles O'Brien, it's a lovely send off from Picard to O'Brien, because realistically, for the majority of his run on TNG, O'Brien was just the transporter, the head, like the chief of Transporter Room 3. And he was only Transporter Room 3 because that was his favorite transporter room. Like, and they actually say that in the episode. So he chose Transporter Room 3, and in theory there are other chiefs of Transporter Room 2, 1, 7, whatever it is. It's just that he was so damn good at his job that Transporter Room 3 became the main transporter room. And then, of course, because of that, he ended up on Deep Space Nine, which meant that he's an integral part of the Dominion War. He'd also been, as is revealed in DS9, an integral part of the Cardassian War as well. He was on a very important ship in that war. So, I mean, it might be seen as a joke, but actually, maybe. Like, and who's to say what his child grew up to be, and grandchildren, and what their influence was. So
Well, moving on to episode 4, Moist Vessel.
Yep.
This is the episode where Captain Freeman and Ensign Mariner, who, as we know, are mother and daughter, have to kind of fight and overcome their
differences.
Yeah.
to coexist, to find a middle ground.
She wants her off the ship.
Yeah.
And Ransom comes up with the idea of, why not just give her all the shit jobs? But she even manages to find fun in doing them.
Yeah, I mean, this
is where we get the joke about the holodeck waste removal.
What I was just about to say. Yeah.
Yeah.
The thing where you suddenly realise that, as in DS9, where Quark is blatantly open about the fact that like his holodecks are just like sex rooms. I mean, essentially, it's like they're legalized brothels, but because they are giant replicators as opposed to real people, then there's, I suppose, there's no moral issues, but it might be quite messy.
It's Captain Freeman, like, people use it for that.
Yeah. And then, but yeah, so she finds some fun. She managed to make some competition in some of the disgusting jobs that she,
which is when she has to
be
thought of promoting her.
Yeah. And so she gets her lieutenant's pip and gets promoted to lieutenant. And instead of trying to gross her out,
shifts department at the same time.
Yeah, although obviously, like the color, although it does have a broader, like I think there is some crossover, because obviously, like within, each department, there'd be different needs, I suppose. So, like, you would, in theory, in the engineering,
I guess
you still need a leader.
It's the theory that if you're on command track,
yeah,
but once you're in the senior officers, it's only really the captain and the first officer
that wear red,
who need to wear command red, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like, if you assume that yellow is the security color, then that
yellow
means
is security and engineering. It's operations.
Yeah.
And blue is science.
Yeah, blue is science. Yeah. So yes, I mean, she would fit actually quite well into either of those. Realistically, she's got the skills for both. Speaking of yellow, little note that I didn't realize until these two episodes. You know, like on the new uniform, there's that yellow. Well, the coloured line. The same line is on the hull of the spaceship.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's
quite a nice touch, I thought.
I think it was designed to. I think the class that the Cerritos is, the colour dictates what its main layout, like equipment setup, is. Yeah, I think the ship's been designed to be an all-purpose vessel.
Yeah.
But some might be more science-oriented, some might be more engineering oriented,
or battle-oriented, or
So we've got different colours to dictate that.
That's kind of cool. I like that. That's a nice little touch.
It was a nice episode. This a big shocking canon revelation.
Which was that one then?
The entire Star Trek universe rests on the back of a smiling koala.
Oh yes, yeah. On the B story on this one, one of the lower decks crew was about to ascend to another plane of existence.
He was a lieutenant, I think. Not.
I got the feeling he was a ranking lower deck as opposed to a.
He had his lieutenant's pip.
He had his lieutenant's pip, but that probably just meant that he was a senior member of the scum at the bottom. Right.
This episode really had its fun with TNG tropes.
Yes.
People ascending. People ascended in TNG left, right, and center. So much ascension.
But then at the same time, in the original series, there were tons of godlike creatures anyway. So it was always that question of like, how do you get from one to another?
And the activities that the senior officers get up to.
Yes.
Like poker,
yeah,
karaoke nights.
Yes, it was definitely it definitely was a bit of a TNG riff, this one. But then there was also some quite classic Trek in that, like the ship that they were towing was this big, massive thing that they didn't necessarily know where it came from. Like it had a bit of a suspect past to it, but they knew it was something that they wanted to preserve, so they were towing it to a starbase so that they could try and find out more about it. Seemed to be a bit of a living relic. And it had this goo inside of it that was a terraforming goo, that anything inorganic that it touched, it would turn into organic material.
Yes.
So there was a few nice nods to old Trek, and of course the classic thing like, oh, there might be a disease in it or something like that. This was just an expansion on that. What I realised in this episode as well, which is a lovely touch, is that the Orion character, because obviously, as was established in Enterprise, the Orion slave women are not actually the slaves; they're the dominant part of that species, because they have an ability to enslave the males through seduction. So make people like them, essentially.
Yeah.
So this character's obsession with people liking her is actually potentially part of the fact that, like, in theory, as part of her species and part of her culture, she has this ability to be able to make people like her. But at the same time, obviously, like, she can't use that ability, but she still has that urge and that need to make
outside
people like
of
her.
Star Trek, though, it's an incredibly relatable.
It is an incredibly
emotion.
relatable thing. Yeah, it's wonderful, but obviously within the context of an Orion, like, it's also an interesting thing of, like, you know, like, if the entire species is based on the fact that, like, one of the sexes can make everyone like them, what happens when you're essentially prohibited from using that power? Like, there is still that need to be liked, I suppose. Like,
I mean, I'm not entirely sure they were going for that.
They might not have.
I think they were just going for a very relatable kind of thought process of
wanting
needing
to be
liked. So the point is, we see it with a guy who's basically just a jackass who let his thing go on far too long.
With the Ascension guy, yeah. That, like, he needed to be liked, but he also was doing it to stand out, to be different.
Yeah.
So that he could be promoted, essentially, so that he could get further.
At various points, haven't we also all had stupid things we've decided to take up to
try and, like, self-identify, I suppose, like, whether it be for yourself or whether it be to stand out in the crowd. And then, of course, you know, the joke with that a lot of the time is that you tend to, like, not stand out in a crowd because everyone else is wearing that same T-shirt that you've decided is cool.
So. We also had a C plot this week. Boimler really annoyed that Mariner got promoted. Decides to start being bad at everything.
Yeah. And he isn't even. But the thing is, obviously, he's not good at being bad. He's bad at being bad. So he completely misjudges all the situations in which he tries. But,
so far, I'm enjoying this service.
So am I. I think it's obviously written by either an individual or a small team of people who really get Star Trek, not just fanboy about it.
These 2 episodes are written by Dave Eilenfeld and David Wright, and the second episode was written by Ann Kim.
Although obviously they would have been overseen by a showrunner, but the entire team, again, they obviously love Star Trek, but not in the like angry fanboy kind of love way.
Yeah.
They properly understand it. Like and
it
like,
has the same love of Star Trek as, and I think specifically the same love for the next generation that the Orville kind of has, but this is in the Star Trek.
It's actually in canon,
Yeah.
Which makes it an even more difficult prospect in some ways, because you've got to ride that knife edge of having humor within what is actually officially Star Trek.
Yes.
And so far they're getting away with it.
And I believe we have a big guest star in the last episode of the season as well.
I know Q's in it at some point.
Oh, I did not know Q was in it.
Sorry, spoilers. I'm sure I've seen an image of Q in it at some point. Even if it's just like a flashing image. But yeah, I don't know the other one. Although I'm assuming potentially Riker. But like he seems more the character that might actually turn up. So,
but on that note,
yeah, we'll leave it for this week.
Yes.
Yeah, and we'll be back next week with another one where we'll be looking at
episodes 5 and 6.
5 and 6, yeah. And if you are a fan of our other stuff, next week
we have a Valentine's Day special double bill film club.
Yeah, double feature film club, yeah. Which I've edited today, and watching it back, actually it wasn't bad. So there you go.
Resounding praise.
That's advertising for it. I mean, to be honest, if I didn't cringe at the sound of my own voice, like, it must be okay. Because usually,
bear in mind, the podcast network that isn't bad.
Yeah, I'll take that, to be honest.
Yeah,
I'll take that. And on that note, live long and prosper, everyone.
See you soon, guys.